Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, Ad Nauseam listeners, to episode 43 of the podcast. My name is David Noe. As always, I'm here in the vomitorium with my good friend, Dr. Jeff Winkle.
A hesitation and a question.
It was deliberate.
It was deliberate?
Absolutely. It's called Uptalk.
Uptalk? I've heard that a lot out there.
Yeah.
But
is
you
it called
too,
Uptalk?
At two, David. Well, I still consider you a good friend.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, but I'm doing well, by the way.
Oh, good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been a little stormy here.
Yes.
Outside the vomitorium.
A deluge of rain.
Yes, nonstop for the last few days.
Well, it was bound to happen sooner or later.
Oh, my gosh. Yes, right now it's got that weird green stillness going on. It feels tornado-y to me.
Yeah, the sky is lowering at us.
Lowering?
I think that's how you pronounce
Glowering?
it. No, lowering.
Lowering?
Look it up.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Lowering.
Well, it sounds like what I feel out there.
There you go.
Yeah. But I'm doing well. You're doing good,
Yes.
I assume. What are we talking about tonight?
Tonight, we are going to redirect the audience's attention.
We are?
Away from the fabulous episode we wanted to do with our advisor, Dr. Ken Bratt, a friend,
right.
colleague. He was going to talk about the archaeology of Philippi and Paul's presence there, but he came down with a cold.
Cold and couldn't speak above a whisper.
That's correct. He wasn't sure he was going to sound good on air, so he asked if he could take a rain check. We said, of course, Ken, absolutely. And so tonight, instead, we're going to talk about, well, we will get back to Ken at some point. He's scheduled in the weeks ahead.
Yes.
But tonight, we're going to talk about the 10 things we hated about graduate school.
That's right. It's not going to be just an hour of complaining and moaning.
That's my plan.
That's your plan? Nobody wants to hear that, right?
You're sure?
It is. But we're going to be talking about, some of the discomforts, the disquiets, and some of the weird stuff that happened to us during grad school.
Yes. I think the genesis of this episode was our sense that people think that graduate school is all glamour and glitz. You know, it's stepping out of sports cars, walking down the red carpet.
Yes.
You know, scooping up parfaits and a parfait.
Parfaits. Off the ground?
Off a tray.
Off a tray. Okay.
The parfaits are delivered on a tray.
Yeah.
They hand them to you, and you deliver your paper, and then you live the easy life.
That's pretty much, I think, that's most people's picture of what graduate school
Right.
is.
That's the picture I had in my mind before we attended.
Oh, but it was a rude awakening.
Yes.
My goodness.
Quite.
Yes.
But we'll get to that in due time.
Yeah.
Jeff, you have our shout out this evening.
Yes, our shout out goes out to Ryan Heckerman, who was we both had him as a student, I believe.
Correct.
Yes, and enthusiastic, deeply interested young man. I've never had a student quite like him. He always sat in the front row for me and was always engaged. Loved to come by the office and talk about the material.
Not just engaged, but he also had his own interesting story. He was in the U.S. Air Force.
Oh, right.
Traveled the world. He was in Okinawa. He was stationed in Germany. He was in Turkey once. This guy, I mean, he should be running his own podcast, frankly.
It's true. Yeah, he's seen it all. He was born and raised in Jackson, Michigan. I believe he's back there now working. And he was actually baptized in Cyprus, where Aphrodite, the goddess herself, was born, according to Greek myth, where Lazarus had his second death and is buried.
According to tradition.
According to tradition, right.
Yep.
But yet spent 9.5 years in the Air Force, traveled throughout the world, Europe, Japan, and right now he's currently working as a behavior technician with autistic youth. So thank you, Ryan, for listening, and thank you for being such an engaged student for both of us.
Yes, we're really grateful to have a fellow like yourself as part of our audience.
Indeed.
Thank you.
All right, Dave, you have our opening quote to this evening, correct?
That's right.
And it's a bit of an unconventional quote, but one that more or less shows how in hundreds of years, really nothing has changed when it comes to academia, right?
That's right. I'm going to read a little bit of a description from a work we've never read. The work is entitled, quite appropriately, Pedantius.
Ah, yes.
So what is a pedant, Jeff?
Someone who's really annoyingly erudite.
Yes.
And nitpicky.
Encyclopedic in their knowledge.
Yes,
Don't
right.
Bore you with the facts.
But to a degree that it's a complete turnoff.
Right.
Yeah.
ask them a simple question, and you cannot get from them a simple answer. So what do you think the weather is like today? Well, it's interesting that you would say weather, because actually the word weather originated in the 1950s, and they go on and on.
Yes, that's a pedant.
That's a pedant.
Yeah.
So there was a Latin comedy. This comedy was performed at Cambridge in the 1580s, and it was entitled Pedantius. It was performed at Trinity College, Cambridge, in the 1580s. It was then written down in the 1630s, and it appeared in print for the first time in 1631. And I want to read just a little bit of the summary of it, because perhaps our audience will find it interesting. So this is from the edition by G.C. Moore Smith, and this was itself published in 1905, which is more than a century ago already. So here's a little bit of the introduction. When in the winter of 1581, Fawcett or Wingfield, or a group of Trinity men, took in hand to produce a comedy for Candlemas, which is one of the the academic seasons or semesters there at Cambridge. What process did they adopt? Did they invent their play, their plot and all? Or did they lay their hands on some German or Italian comedy and transform it to their purposes? No earlier play has yet been found which bears much resemblance to the Trinity comedy as produced. The character of the pedant, derived ultimately from the Bacchides of Plautus, is common to a vast number of comedies. Italian and German, and the main traits of this character are seen alike in the scholastic philosopher Dramatist and the humanist Pedantius. Now, as we headed off to grad school, Jeff, in the early 90s, you were 1993?
93, yep.
And I was 95?
Yep.
So what kind of expectations, pedantic expectations, did you have?
I like to think I went into it with my eyes fairly wide open, but I didn't really know what to expect. I was expecting for it to be very challenging, but I did have a kind of a rosy view of it as well. I did have kind of this idealized view of I'd be really set free to study something that I was interested in a very kind of focused individual manner, and I would be encouraged and nurtured along the way.
Handed parfaits?
Parfaits I thought would come later. Maybe I had to wait a couple years for the parfaits, but it didn't turn out like that.
Not like that.
No. How about you? What was your what when you went off in 95? What were you expecting?
Well, I want to build a little bit of audience suspense on that.
Okay.
I'm going to play unfair here and go back to Pedantius for just a second.
Please do.
Okay. Our comedy, in the persons of Pedantius and Dramatitus, satirizes two distinct academic types: the Ciceronian humanist, who had taken the place of the medieval grammarian, and the philosopher of the school. The author goes on and says, to the humanists, two courses were open: to insist on a restoration of the true logic of Aristotle and a rejection of the misconstructions and additions made by Peter the Spaniard, Petrus Hispanus, and his countless commentators, or to denounce the whole study of logic as worthless and pernicious and demand that its place be filled by rhetoric. So there's this anecdote about how men tumble into theology, right? So a lot of this preparation at the time, this pedantic preparation, was preparation for divine studies, theology. Right. Mm-hmm. So here's the little limerick or so. It goes, they were superciliously caught, a little rag of rhetoric, a less lump of logic, a piece or patch of philosophy. So making fun of these guys who are just throwing together a little bit of learning here and there.
Yes.
So if it's okay if I just read a little bit of the argument here, just the first sentence in Latin, give a brief translation.
Sounds good.
And that'll set up, I think, some of the themes we're going to talk about through the rest of the episode.
All right.
So here's the argumentum. Lidiam virginem corundae senis ancilla mamabat cremuli olim servus crobulus, quam eandem sibi petiit pedagogos pedantius.
So what do we got there?
So it means something like this. The young woman Lydia, whom the servant Crobulus, once upon a time, was loving, right? He was loving her. She was the handmaiden of the old woman Corunda. So this woman Lydia, sounds like a Plautina comedy, right? The school teacher, the pedagogos, Pedantius, he was seeking this same woman as a love interest for himself.
Ah, yes.
So the setup of the play, based on Plautus and Terence, things we've talked about with Fontaine and such, is that this pedant, right, has got to find his way through the tricks and traps of being a school teacher with too much grammatical knowledge,
right,
to find true love.
Ah, yes. I'm going to guess it doesn't go so well for him.
No, it's. I haven't read the whole thing. I'm not sure that an English translation of the whole exists. The Latin is really good.
There's your next book there.
You think so,
Professor Noe? Absolutely. And I'm not joking. Yeah.
And if we have a screenplay, could you play Pedantius?
Could I play? I think I'm a little too old. No.
Long in the tooth, as they say?
Yes, we could find some young buck to play that role.
Sounds good.
Do we have any idea, was this a smash hit?
It was very popular.
Was it really?
It was performed in front of King James.
Is that right?
Yeah, James I.
Did he give it 2 enthusiastic thumbs up?
I don't know what royal bloodlines were like at the time. He may have had more than 2 thumbs. However many he had, they all went up.
King James, 3 thumbs up.
That's
I like
right.
it. I like it. Yeah.
So, the pedant, the guy who has way too much grammatical knowledge, too much time on his hands, this is an old theme.
Yes.
And I think it might be a useful touchstone as we launch into 10 things that we hated about grad school.
I agree.
Let's get started, Jeff. We'll start out with you. You asked me what my expectations were as I headed off in 1995. But let's
we'll get to that later.
That's right. Let's go through Winkle first. What are the top 10 things that you hated?
Right. Well, are we going to get to 10? Are we going to go?
Let's have your 5.
Okay.
And then I'll add my 15.
All right. So, but no guarantees about kind of how many we'll get to.
That's right.
Okay. So I went off to grad school. I went to Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois.
Chicagoland.
Yeah,
right? Set the scene for us.
Yes. So I loaded all my stuff on the back of a pickup truck. Had to strap it down with bungee cords.
Now, was this pulled by mules?
I remember my father drove me. He drove the pickup truck, and I was following behind in my 1988 Nissan Sentra.
Were there any family members sitting in rocking chairs somewhere?
It was very hillbillies.
It's like the Clampets.
Yes. But I remember driving down around the bend towards Gary, and some gust of wind taking a huge, rug or set of sheets just went flying, and it was just a loss. I had to buy a new set of sheets once I got sheets.
Something like that happened to Odysseus.
Oh, did he lost his sheets?
Yeah, it was book 25 of the Odyssey.
Oh, 25.
That's right.
It's the one we didn't cover.
How did you choose Northwestern? What's the story behind that?
Again, there was no kind of romantic ideals. Like, I had always dreamed of studying classics at Northwestern. It really came down to they gave me the best offer. So I had been accepted by a few other schools.
Would you say they gave you an offer you could not refuse?
Yes, and I'm really trying hard to resist doing my Brando.
Yeah, so am I.
Give me an offer. No, it's terrible. I got accepted by a few schools. One offered a teaching assistantship or in-state tuition, but Northwestern offered me the full package. So no tuition, teaching assistantship for 5 years or something.
That's a Big Ten school.
It's a Big Ten school, right?
It's a great football team. I'm sure drew you there.
It was in 95, I believe. They went to the Rose Bowl.
Yes. But in fact, Ken Bratt, one of his family members, played on that team.
How come I never knew this?
I don't know. You were probably studying classics.
Probably.
You should have been paying attention to football.
But I didn't go to Northwestern because I thought, a lighthouse in the fog for the study of classics. They gave me an offer I really couldn't refuse.
Right.
Yeah. So I went there, but, I always thought, Northwestern, very good school. It has, a high academic reputation, if not necessarily for the graduate study of classics, but a very, very good school with a very good academic reputation. So,
do you remember your first class in grad school?
I do, and that's actually my first story.
All right, let's hear it.
So one of the things I hated, and I should say, I want to temper this a little bit. All these things, all the stories that I tell, all have kind of their positive side too. These were all catabases that I had to go through, come out the other side. So they were things that caused a lot of pain at the time.
We could ask Mishka to put a drum roll before each of these.
Oh, I like that.
Okay.
So I came in as a cohort of 1. I was the only graduate student admitted that year. And there's just a handful of other graduate students ahead of me. So it was a very small group of graduate students, all of us eccentric in our own kind of ways. But it quickly dawned on me that the temperature of the room or the kind of the ethos of the department was sink or swim. We're going to see what you got. And if you don't got it, we'd rather see you go.
Right.
So I definitely got the sense there that he said, we'll take graduate students, but we'd really rather not have them. So
you were at the top of your cohort, though, right?
I was at the very top, right. And at the bottom, as it turned out, right? So the very first class I took was a Homer survey. We read the Iliad. And the very first assignment, this was given on Monday and had to be completed by Friday, was to memorize in Greek the first 150 lines of the Iliad, and then go in and perform them for the professor of the class, who was Professor Dan Garrison, who was, and I'm not kidding at all, this is almost no exaggeration here, the spitting image of Poseidon. Kind of the piercing blue eyes.
Didn't wear a shirt to class?
He was always shirtless. It was
Heroic torso.
It was so unsettling.
Is this the Dan Garrison of the Catullus volume?
Yes. I mean, he's put out some really wonderful work. The Student's Catullus, his book on Horace is great, but a very intimidating man, especially first time you meet him, first class you have with him. It was clear to me that this was an assignment, basically, either you can do this or maybe you should consider doing something else.
Poseidon wanted you to sink.
Yes, he did. Yeah. And I mean, this was such a well-known thing that Garrison looked at Poseidon that it became a ritual for students. If they passed his class, they would give him some sort of trident, and so he had them all over his office. These kind of inflatable, kind of like devil's pitchforks.
Incredible.
So he knew it and he played it up. And so now in undergrad, I had done some hexameters. I can't for the life of me remember who I read Homer with at Calvin College.
It's probably George Harris.
I think it was George Harris, but he actually did very little with kind of reading aloud.
Yes.
And so
he liked to read aloud himself.
Yes, he did. He liked
and had a fantastic booming voice.
He did, yes. A Northwestern PhD himself. So I had done some reading of hexameters, but I was not, all that skilled in it. And so I remember that whole week walking the halls, Kresge Hall at Northwestern, trying my best to learn these 150 lines in the Greek. And then when to perform it, I thought I had it down. And so you go in there, and he's sitting there, Poseidon, surrounded by his mermaids and mermen, and they start performing the Greek. And he would stop me in the middle of a line and say, that word you just said, what's the gender number in case? What's it doing there? And I had no idea that was going to happen.
Did you have to do push-ups if you got it wrong?
No, I sweat. I probably lost 10 pounds just sweating sitting there. And then after you answer that question, you were expected to pick it up in the middle of the line and care for it. It was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. And so he was not happy at the end of my 150-line performance.
But you survived?
I survived, but I had to go and do it again.
You went on to pass the class,
I did.
though, right?
I did. But I had to go do that again the next week. It was brutal. It was absolutely brutal.
And you remained at the top of your cohort throughout.
Throughout,
okay.
Exactly.
So let's go on to number two.
Number two. Another thing that drove me crazy was not all the professors, but none of the professors kind of thought grad students are there not just to learn, but to do chores for them. Pick up my dry cleaning.
Laundry?
Well, just shy of that. I remember...
Unclog my toilet, things like that.
There was one kind of department dinner that we were going to have together, and one of the graduate students, not me, my buddy John, was tasked with picking up all the groceries for the dinner. Had to deliver it. And so that kind of stuff that irked me.
So you hitched up the mules. You
right.
hauled the pickup down to...
Yeah.
Was there a Whole Foods in the early 90s?
Dominick's is what it was. Right. Dominick's was the food chain in Evanston and Chicago.
And they gave you their credit card or something?
Something
put it on the department
something like
tab,
that. Or
right?
they just let you pay for it themselves. What are we paying you the TA, the apprenticeship for? So there was one time... their department was hosting a conference, and there were a bunch of people flying in from all over.
Right.
Pietro Pucci was coming in.
Oh, Pietro Pucci.
Have you heard of Pietro?
No.
A noted Lacanian scholar.
Oh.
So it doesn't even know if anybody talks about Lacan anymore. But he was a big
French theorist, right?
Exactly. One of those postmodern, Derrida guys. He was coming into O'Hare, and someone needed to pick him up. So Bob
You
Wallace,
seem like a good candidate.
Jeff, you're standing here. So Bob Wallace says, go pick him up. Make a sign that says Pucci on it. You stand there waiting for
Did you draw a little dog or something?
So the conference was at Loyola, which is on the lakeshore.
Of course.
You could picture your map. Right?
Yeah, I got it.
I had to drive to O'Hare, which is a nightmare any time of the day, any day of the week.
Yeah, this is 26 years ago?
This is 19. This is got to be 95, 96.
Yeah, 26 years ago. I'm sensing a little bitterness.
Oh, it was. I mean, this was also pre-cell phone, right? Cell phones would have cleared all of this up.
So, it made it so easy.
I drive out there
because there's Uber.
Exactly.
You could just send him the link. He can Uber his way to Loyola.
Right, exactly. Pucci can take care of himself.
Right. Let Pucci take care of himself. That's my catchphrase.
So I'm already dreading the ride back with Pucci. What am I going to talk about with this guy?
Do you speak Italian?
Pidgin Italian.
Right.
And I know nothing about Lacan.
Right. Well, that was your chance to learn.
So I'm just the brutal, awkward conversation that's going to follow. I'm dreading it all the way out there. So I finally muscle my way through the Chicago traffic to O'Hare.
Right.
I find the gate.
Yes.
And I'm standing with my stupid sign,
Pucci sign.
I was thrilled because I was on time.
Right.
And people are coming off the plane. Everybody comes off.
No Pucci.
No Pucci. There's no Pucci. I'm standing there. What am I supposed to do?
Right.
So if I go to a payphone, who am I going to call? Nobody has a phone. So I
You're going to call one of your grad school professors and say, Poochie did not deplane.
The Poochie has not landed. Where's the Poochie? So I threw the Poochie sign in my back seat, and I drove all the way back to Loyola.
Let me guess, he met you there.
He's sitting in the front row. Right. And Bob Wallace says, who is my department guy who assigned me the task, he says, "Oh yeah, Pietro found his own way here. He must have walked right past me. He got his own car." And
so he's Eurystheus, right? Wallace is Eurystheus. You're Hercules.
Exactly.
Go out to O'Hare and collect Poochie.
But there's no apology. There was no, "Oh man, sorry you had to do that."
Wow, you're a grad student.
Well, and then in front of the fellow grad students, he goes, "Well, I think he said, well, kudos to you, Jeff," so, which earned me the nickname Polykudos from the other grad schools, and they said that sneeringly to me. "Oh, Polykudos has entered the room."
Really?
Oh, it's awful.
Wow. But I can tell by the tone of your voice, these are all happy, distant memories. Now, there's no bitterness left.
No, there's a little
no brackish tang in the back of your mouth.
It's very brackish. I don't know what you're hearing over there.
Well, let's move on to number 3.
Number 3, all right. I also had a professor, Jim Packer, who was a great archaeologist, famous for his work on the Forum of Trajan in Rome. But he was also a man, wasn't all that crazy about lecturing himself. He'd rather be doing his digging and his research, right? So I was a TA along with my buddy John. We were his TAs for this massive lecture survey on Roman history, 120 students in the class.
That is massive. And
he said to us, he goes, "You guys are going to be teachers someday. Here, I'll give you this lecture. You handle this lecture," right? And so I had never done this before. I had never lectured, let alone in front of 120 students.
You had memorized 150 lines of Homer.
I had, exactly, and completely forgot it all within a week. And so he assigned me the lecture on Hadrian. And so I sweated it out at home on my computer and went in the library. This is going to be great.
No Wikipedia.
No Wikipedia, right?
No YouTube reconstructions of Hadrian's arch.
No, this is right before kind of the explosion of the internet, right? Yeah. So this is old school. So I thought, okay, I can do this. This is, how hard could this be?
Calvin College prepped you well.
Right. So I put it all together, and it was one of these classes I met twice a week. So it was an hour and a half class. You're expected to fill that hour and a half. He did straight lecture, no discussion, nothing. And so I got up there, and long story short, about 7.5 minutes in, I'd pretty much done everything. I said everything I was going to say about Hadrian. I gave myself space for I can riff on this. There was no riffing.
No riff. You said it's a 70-minute class?
It was a 90-minute class. 90-minute class.
So you got to minute 7 and
right.
83 more minutes. What am I going to do?
Yeah, and Packer's sitting in the front row with his arms crossed just looking at me.
He's there.
Of course he's there.
I didn't know he was there.
Oh, he was there. He was there to critique.
Evaluate.
Yes. And my buddy John is sitting right next to him, and John's just grinning at me.
At Polykudos.
Right. And so I remember mentioning something about, Hadrian was famous for wearing the beard, right? He wanted to look like a Philhellene, right? A philosopher. And so I remember I got to 7.5 minutes, and I just looked up, and I could just feel the sweat trickling down my back, and I just said, "That's all I got." And
did you play charades or something? Right? Here's another arch.
What happened was my friend John raised his hand and he said, "Tell me more about the beard." Right? He wanted me to riff on the beard.
Right.
And I said something stupid, and I said, "Well, that's all I got." And
it was lustrous.
The immense sigh of relief from the crowd that say, "Wow, we get to get out of here 83 minutes early."
Right.
The students couldn't leave fast enough.
Right.
And Packer came up to me afterwards. I thought he was just going to tear me a new one.
Right.
But he goes, "It's a little brief. Jeff." It was awful. What an awful moment. But it was one of those things that I learned that, when I have to do this again, I got to go about it a completely different way.
Yeah, you got to be a lot deeper in your prep.
A lot deeper, yes. So
longer pauses, pregnant glances. Is there such a thing as a pregnant glance?
Oh, there were a lot that day.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
It's funny, though. I'm not surprised, if I may digress on your anecdote for a moment.
Please.
I'm not surprised that the students loved it, because students always love it when class is canceled.
Right.
It's one of the few products people are happy to pay for and then not receive.
Not receive, right, exactly.
Please don't teach us. Can we go already?
Isn't that the truth?
It's shocking.
Yes.
That's the world I'm leaving behind. So
yeah.
Let's go on to number 4.
Number 4, had an advisor who I will not name, very mercurial, very unpredictable. And I think that's one of the things I really didn't like about graduate school from my experience was you never knew what was going to happen one day to the next.
Too many big personalities.
Yes, and our discipline, I think our corner of the humanities attracts
There's no doubt about it.
The eccentrics, right?
There's no doubt about it.
Right, yeah.
These are people who, God bless them, could do very well in that play from, the early 17th century, Pedantius.
Right.
These are people, like ourselves, I'm sure I'm describing ourselves, who are obsessed about certain very small corners of human knowledge, and they're not always so good about gauging the rest of their environment.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. And I certainly don't hold myself up as a paradigm of, being comfortable in social circles. I mean, I miss a lot of cues myself. I mean, I carry with that, with the discipline, I bring that my own eccentricity, right? But some things were just so bizarre.
Yeah.
And so one of these.
So tell us about this one.
This advisor, I was turning in a dissertation proposal.
Okay.
Right? So kind of the first stages of the last stage. And so I had written up this detailed outline of what I wanted to do for my dissertation on Apuleius.
Right.
And I brought it into my advisor. We sat down in his office and we read through it together for about an hour. And he was saying, "This looks good. This looks very doable. You're doing something new here. There's some new ground. I like this. Let's run with it." So I walked in there feeling great.
Right.
I said, "Wow, my gosh, that was seamless."
Not at all like driving back from O'Hare.
No, not at all. Not at all. And so the very next morning, at literally 3:00 in the morning, the phone, which was like on the nightstand right next to my head.
And it's probably a rotary or something.
It was not. It was touch tone.
Touch tone.
It was
okay.
touch tone, right? But that thing buzzes to life at 3 a.m. and it's my advisor. And so I'm coming out of this dead sleep.
Right.
And he's just saying, "Jeffrey, this will not do. This will not do. What were you thinking?" And he's going through like points.
Who is this?
Yeah, exactly. He's going through points in my proposal and just saying, "What were you thinking? What were you thinking?" And I was so out of it. And he finally says, "I need you in my office at 7:00. We need to talk about this." This is the same guy who just said, "Oh, this is great."
Right.
So I went in there 4 hours later.
This is like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing?
Yes.
So in the early afternoon or the previous day, he was all sweetness and light?
Yes. And then.
But don't talk about Apuleius at 3 a.m.
No.
because then it's shadows and...
It's Mr. Hyde. Here he comes. So I went in there at 7:00 the next
7
morning.
a.m.
And he was ready, guns blazing, and just tore the whole thing up and said, "You got to do this over." And I walked out of there just like, what happened?
How long was your proposal?
The outline was probably a 20-page outline.
And had a bibliography,
Yes,
right?
exactly. It was all annotated.
5-6 pages.
Yes. And
It's a significant amount of work.
it was a lot of work. In the span of 24 hours, it was accepted and rejected. And so that kind of stuff it drove me insane. Because, it was some kind of psychological torture.
Right.
So bizarre.
Huh.
And then
number 5?
Number 5. This goes along with just kind of the unpredictability, just kind of the weirdness of the place. And another professor, again, who I will not name, he also taught a seminar that I took. He showed up for the first class, and then the next class meeting, there was just a note for him saying, "Just read it and learn it yourself, and I'll give you the final exam." Right.
It's really devoted to the art of lecturing and pedagogy.
Right. So he disappeared. But there was a very strange thing that happened. I don't know the full details, but apparently he became very paranoid that somebody was breaking into his office at night and stealing his research on Plato.
Well, you know how valuable that is.
I know exactly.
People are beating down the door.
Lock and key.
It reminds me, I have Plato books in my office.
What?
I better go lock
You better lock those things up.
Right.
So he got so paranoid, he was convinced that he would come to his office next morning and things were rearranged.
Yeah.
And somebody stealing.
Middle dialogues would be swapped for early dialogues and early for late.
Exactly, right. Telltale signs.
The consequences could be extensive.
That's right. Strange doings. So apparently he got so paranoid that he brought his Doberman Pinscher and set up a little bed inside the office so that whoever's going to break into the office would meet, I don't know what is his Zeus or Apollo waiting there for him.
Right, a one-headed Cerberus.
Exactly. And now what happened next?
Oh, you're saying that was the name of the dog?
Yeah, yes.
Zeus or Apollo. He had named the dog after one of the Greek gods. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, that's a Magnum PI reference. You remember Higgins had Zeus and Apollo?
I didn't remember that those were the names of the dogs.
Yeah.
I like the theme song.
Yeah, good, yes. Mike Post.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the composer?
Yeah. Very catchy.
How do you know these things?
So anyway, and this is where the details get fuzzy. Apparently, he came back the next morning, one of these mornings where the dog was sleeping in there, and he opened the door, and his dog was dead.
I have a theory.
You have a theory?
Yeah, whoever was after the Plato
Yes.
snuck in, poisoned the dog, and then just lacked the strength to carry through on removing the Platonic corpus.
I think there was a theory actually not that far. That was probably this professor's own personal theory. But somehow this dog died, and he was convinced that it was retaliation or a burglary gone wrong. It was bizarre.
That's a good way for a dog to die, though. Guarding Plato.
It's a noble way to go.
It is a noble way to go.
So
I'd be happy to go that way.
So my sense is that
you got to get through me to get to these, Platonic dialogues.
The dog swallowed an eraser and choked to death. That's all that happened, right? That's seriously. There was no intrigue at all. But that was just like that. In some ways, I mean, that's an extreme example. But that kind of gives you a sense of kind of the weirdness and the color of the unpredictability of that department. You never knew what you were going to get walking in every morning. It meant it was never dull, but it was very stressful.
Those are absolutely brilliant stories, Jeff. Did you make it through grad school?
I did. It took me a long time.
Okay.
Most of these guys in the department really just wanted to do the research. They didn't want to teach.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of professors at R1 schools are kind of like that.
Well, I don't think it's restricted to R1 schools, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it is probably more prominent there because they have more funds to spend on research.
Exactly.
It's natural.
Exactly. Well, so what that meant was that they were happy to throw courses to the grad students. Oh, you want to teach that? Go ahead and do it. And I ended up, of course, loving teaching. And so I taught as many classes as they would give me, and of course that just slowed down my own progress. And
Sure. But it's a kind of performance.
Yeah.
Teaching is. It's very pleasurable.
It is. Yeah, good stuff.
Well, we're going to get on to the second part of the episode after the break. Today's episode is brought to you by Ad Astra Coffee Roasters, the coffee that takes you to the stars, Ad Astra, but you can do an end run around all that harsh stuff.
Yeah, great stuff. Comes to us from Hillsdale, Michigan. We've both had the privilege of trying a lot of their different roasts. Tenebris is my favorite.
Yep, there's Las Lajas.
Lajas de Huehuetenango.
There you go.
Oh, I got to say it
the
this
poetry
week.
Series.
Yep. Great stuff. I have seriously I have not had better coffee in my life.
It's phenomenal.
It is.
And Patrick Whalen and his crew down there, they've been roasting beans for years. They have a special process. They only accept beans that score 80% or higher on the Richter scale.
The Richter scale, is that what it is? No,
I don't know. That has to do with seismic activity, I think.
It does. Some kind of bean scale.
I think so.
Right, but they only accept the best.
The best. That's the point we're trying to make.
That's right.
All right.
Yep.
And if you go to Ad Astra Roasters, ADASTRA Roasters.com, you too can check out some of their delicious high-quality offerings. Jeff, they got a special coupon code, don't they?
They do. So if you enter ANAA in the box that asks for the code on their website, you can get 10% off anything you order, individual orders as well as their monthly subscription.
Exclusive for Ad Nauseam listeners. So
That's
check
right.
it out.
Yep.
Leading off second today in our sponsored lineup is Ratio Coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, listen closely, please. Mark Helweg and his crack team in Portland, Oregon have solved all of your aesthetic and brew-based problems. Jeff, you got some brew-based problems?
I did, but no longer.
Because
I now have the Ratio 6.
And where does it sit?
It sits, it has its pride of place in the kitchen, next to the sink. It's the first thing I go for in the morning. I hit the button, and I know delicious brew is on the way.
Now, did you get the stainless steel, the matte, or the white?
It is matte.
Matte, so it's a nice glossy black kind of, oh, not glossy, but matte, as the name implies.
That's right, yeah. It makes everything else in my kitchen look like junk,
Yeah.
to tell you the truth. It's a beautiful machine.
So Mrs. Winkle, I understand, is especially fond of the bloom stage.
Of the bloom stage, right? So she's convinced that's the secret to the whole thing.
Okay.
It's that's the first stage that the machine goes through. It dispels all the nasty CO2, and then what's left is just amazing coffee down through the Fibonacci shower head, down through the beans, through into the carafe. It's a thing of wonder.
Yeah, I have the Ratio 8. Mine is in an oyster with walnut accent.
Ooh.
It's gorgeous.
Man, it's like a Mercedes.
Yeah, it's really, really nice
Yeah.
as it sits there on my countertop. The response that our Ad Nauseam listeners have made to this Ratio coffee, this is amazing.
It's phenomenal.
It's so gratifying to know that you all are actually listening to the ads and you're liking the product. So Mark is thrilled at how many of these machines are going out there.
There's lots of countertops out there now with the Ratio 6 on them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're enjoying beautiful coffee. They're living the Ad Nauseam life.
That's right.
Taking in the classics, reading some books, drinking some coffee.
And keeping it down.
Exactly. You got to keep it down.
That's
so
right.
How can our listeners get themselves a Ratio 6?
So if you haven't got one of these things yet, listeners, go to ratiocoffee.com, RATIO coffee.com, and in the coupon code box, you type in ANCO, and you get 15% off the Ratio 6.
That's incredible.
Yep, do it now. And last but not least, this episode is also brought to you by Hackett Publishing. Hackett Publishing, a company that's based in Indianapolis, Indiana, and also Cambridge, I believe.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
They're batting cleanup today, right?
Batting cleanup today, putting out quality, affordable, attractive editions, translations of classical works for the last 40 years and hopefully at least 40 more.
I hope so. And such generous support to this podcast. They were, I think, our first advertiser, right?
They were.
First sponsor came on and said, yeah, we want to support the classics, just like we've always been doing.
They were on board right away.
Yes, It was really, really thrilling. And they offer a fantastic lineup of wonderful translations. You've got your Stanley Lombardo, who's translated the Iliad, the Odyssey, and also the Aeneid. You've got the new Len Krizak translation of the Aeneid coming out, but it's not just classics, is it, Jeff?
No, it's everything that if you're interested in the humanities, you're going to find something that you like there. There's Asian literature, there's language instruction. I believe there's a edition of Latin instruction that you like.
Yes,
right?
the Lingua Latina per se illustrata by Hans Orberg. They now own the rights to all of that. They produce really high quality, attractive volumes of that set.
Now, how can our listeners benefit from?
Well, they need to go to hackettpublishing.com. Did I let you get to the end of the sentence?
No, you were so excited. I let you run with it. It's good.
HACKETT publishing.com and enter this coupon code AN2021 in the box which asks for the coupon code AN2021, and you're going to get 20% off plus free shipping. This is a really generous offer. I don't know any publisher that gives you 20% off and free shipping.
No, you can't get that from Amazon.
No. This is phenomenal. So check it out.
All right, Dave, it's your turn. So take us back to, what was it, 1995?
It was 95.
So you loaded up the GeoPrism hatchback?
Not quite.
No, what did you drive off to?
Well, if I can be a little bit pedantic here.
Please.
I graduated Calvin College. It was Calvin College at the time in 1994, but then I had another semester to finish up in the fall of 95.
Okay.
And I was taking all Greek and Latin courses.
That was just crammed chock full?
I think I had one philosophy course because I also majored in philosophy, but I was late to the study of Greek and Latin. I came late to the game, and that meant the last 2 years, it was just nonstop Greek and Latin, basically. And the very last course I took was in January of 95.
Okay.
And this was with George Harris of beloved memory, Memoriae Beatae, a great man, a great scholar. And he said, I want you to read 3 books of the Iliad for your final course here at Calvin. I said, that's great. And he said, you're going to use the Alan Rogers Benner text, which has books 1, 9, and 22, right? Which are the the plot books. I said, okay, great. I'm going to do that. Now, the woman who is now my wife, Mrs. Noe, had graduated early, and she had gone off to Mexico, and she was working as a mission worker in Ciudad Juarez on the border across from El Paso, Texas. Right?
Okay, yeah.
So we were just dating at the time, but this is the last class I needed to finish, and then I was going to be able to drive down to Mexico, right? Rent an apartment and be near her and just work while I waited to go to grad school in the following fall, which would have been the fall of 95.
Gotcha. Now, did she know you were coming down?
Oh, yeah, this was all planned out.
It was all planned out.
We were pretty serious. We were intending to go to graduate school together, and that's, in fact, what happened. But I had this final course to take, and it was Homer's Iliad. Now, I could, as soon as I had finished the tasks, the project, then I was completely done with college, you understand? So there wasn't really a date attached to it. It was just read these 3 books. So as a consequence, of my love waiting for me in another country, and this being the end of my undergraduate career, I was highly motivated.
Yes.
So I read Homer for 10, 12 hours a day. I just sat there and brooded my way through it.
You devoured it.
I did.
Yeah.
Of course, I loved it too. It's not like it was hard, but it was the most significant intellectual discipline I had exercised.
And that had to be
to that point.
Probably adding to the kind of the difficulty or the oddity is that the people of your class had already graduated the previous spring, right?
That's right.
So you were kind of like, did you kind of feel like, I don't really belong here anymore?
Yeah, I had those feelings.
Sure. Yeah, that's hard.
For sure. Yeah. And Professor Harris, he was so generous to me when I went and I would read for him, he was impressed, not because I was such a good student, but he didn't really know how motivated I was. So he said, well, let's start out, and I'm ready for this. I did this. I'm done. Let me go. Right. I finished. I'm gone.
Yeah.
So
Gotcha.
So that was that. And then kind of like you, I had to decide which graduate school to go to. And I applied to 5. I was accepted at 3.
Yes.
I won't say which ones I didn't go to, but I only got financial support from 1. And that was the University of Iowa.
So like me with Northwestern, that kind of decided for you?
It was an easy decision.
Yes.
Yeah. And, I had some reservations at first. I thought, well, Iowa, I want to study some other things. Maybe they don't have it. But it turned out to be a great fit.
It did.
Yeah. And not a grout fit, but a great fit.
Yeah.
The folks there were, they were so generous and helpful to me. And it was great.
Man.
But the theme is, what did I hate about graduate
What did you
school?
hate about it? Can we get to, shall we start with number 1?
Yeah, let's start with number 1.
Okay.
So one of my first memories about graduate school is the sleeplessness and the stress.
Yeah.
And the occasional cutthroatery.
Was it like between graduate students? Or?
Well, yeah, kind of. It was a little bit between the younger ones and the older ones. I mean, I was so green. I was learning the ropes. I had no idea what I was going into. I expected there to be parfaits everywhere, right?
Now, how many people in your cohort?
There were 3 of us.
Okay.
And one of them is now a really good friend. And Dr. Samuel Husky, to whom we gave a shout out many episodes ago, a great friend. And he should tell this story, probably because he'd tell it differently. But there was a third individual, Rebecca, I can't remember her last name, who came in with our cohort, a wonderful woman. But Sam and I were kind of pitted against each other very, very early on. I think because the professor sort of sensed, these guys, they're interested in the same things, maybe a little competitive, and you have all the just tremendous pressure of grad school. Am I going to fall flat on my face? Am I going to succeed? Sink or swim kind of thing. Yeah. So he and I were taking a course together, and we were the only 2 persons in the course, if I'm not mistaken.
That's intimate.
And it was with Professor Jonathan Goldstein, who is now deceased. And was just a brilliant Hellenist. And one of his projects was, this was long before computers, of course, he went through the Demosthenic corpus, right, all of Demosthenes, and he cataloged every particle.
Oh my gosh.
And then he wrote an extensive entry on how Demosthenes uses particles. Man. But he was also, of course, very, very learned in Herodotus. And so Dr. Goldstein and Sam and I sat in his office there, and we translated Herodotus, and I was not very good at it.
Herodotus, that's difficult.
It was tough, right? And I learned later that only first-year graduate students were kind of steered toward Professor Goldstein. So it was a little bit of a rite of passage, right? His job was, I think, to sort of take your measure as a philologist, a student of language. Yeah. His job was maybe to sort of toughen you up a little bit. Right. A lot of people did not like him as much as I did. Okay. Right? So he had a little bit of a brusque exterior, but I learned so much from him. If you could get past that, bristliness kind of, there was just so much to learn.
He had kind of a chewy nougat center.
Huggable portions, I would say. Yeah. I actually took a second class from him. I took a course on Livy, and I can still remember vividly the things that I learned from him. But I will mention one instance where I was trying to, translate something idiomatically, and I was just failing. And he would say, no, every word. As I was just trying to struggling to get to the end of this sentence. Yeah, and so I don't want to, I don't want to make him look bad, because I really came to like him very much.
So gruff but lovable?
Absolutely.
If you could get there,
That's right.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And of course, it was from Goldstein that I learned how to translate the Latin adverb nunc.
Nunc.
Which doesn't mean just now. It's not only temporal, it's inferential. It means as it is. As it is. Man. And I never forget that. Yeah. He taught me that and so much more.
Yeah. Excellent. Now, how about number 2?
Number 2, well, in addition to the sleeplessness, the stress, back to number 1, I had to go to the doctor my first semester and get tested, and I was having all kinds of just terrible health problems. It turns out that sitting at a desk for 12 to 15 hours a day and reading, staying up late and waking up early is not good for the body.
It's not?
No.
Who knew?
Drinking, 4 to 5 pots of coffee, this is not healthy.
Did you like burn the midnight oil, where you guys stay up all night kind of guy?
Yeah. Well, I had gotten into a routine. I could study to 2 a.m., and then I could sleep for 5 hours and get up at 7 and start over. Okay. And being a younger man at the time, right, early 20s, I think it was 23, 22, I could pull that off, for a long time. And then it would catch up with you, right? And I'd crash, and I would sleep for 10 or 12 hours or something.
Now, you're not married yet at this point?
No. We were in grad school for a year and then got married. Okay. So Tara was studying epidemiology, sciences, right? And I was in the humanities. So that was a good contrast. Right. So we're leading, pretty different schedules and lives and so forth.
All right. So getting back to number 2.
Yes, right. Sorry. So number 2 is what I like to call sartorial disarray.
What does that mean?
It means that I didn't know what to wear. I really didn't know how to conduct myself. So this is not so much what I hated about grad school as it is growing pains of becoming acclimated to the profession.
Gotcha.
There's a certain way you're supposed to behave, at least in the the mid 90s at the University of Iowa. There's a certain way you're supposed to behave if you want to become a professor yourself.
Yeah.
And I carried my books around in a pillowcase.
A pillowcase? Why would you do this?
Because I didn't have a proper backpack. And the books that I was carrying, Greek lexicon, Latin dictionary, Latin grammar, my copy of Smythe, my Greek grammar. Then I got primary text. Then I have a box of pencils. Then I have a highlighter. And no technology really at the time.
How huge was your pillow?
It was enormous. I wasn't schlepping around a laptop or anything, but I had all of these miscellaneous and ill-sized items and no way to carry them. So I thought, I thought it was a moment of brilliance, actually, an inspiration. I just hope Mishka doesn't turn this into an Instagram image, but I shoved all this stuff in my pillowcase and off I went and it worked great.
You slung it over your shoulder.
That's right.
Right. And nobody gave you a hard time about this.
I don't remember. If they did, I didn't care because when I got into the classroom and I opened up the yawning maw of my pillowcase and retrieved from its linty depths the books I needed, I was intent.
Yeah.
Herodotus, rapid readings in Latin, Plautus, Terence. I was ready to go.
Yeah.
And I was learning how to bring the heat philologically. Who cares about a pillowcase?
5 minutes of wasted class time while Noe's rustling around in the suitcase. I can never find anything in here.
That's probably what happened. But then eventually, Mrs. Noe stepped in and with her typical wisdom said, if you're going to be a professor, you really got to look the part a little more.
Yeah.
You need to get something. So my grandmother gave me her old Samsonite briefcase.
It's
a black hard shell with a tiny little keys that you can lock it with, on top.
Yeah.
And it worked great.
So you leapfrogged the backpack and went right to the briefcase.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Circa 1950, I still have that briefcase.
Oh, man.
And so then, I looked like I was either a grad school or maybe a CIA agent skulking around campus. The sartorial disarray carried into other settings as well.
How so?
Well, in the fall of 95, one of the first courses that I taught was Intro Latin. Now, remember, I had studied 3 or 4 semesters of Latin total by this point.
Yeah.
Because I was that late bloomer in terms of getting into Greek and Latin. Mm-hmm. So I went into the classroom to teach undergrads as a TA, at an R1 Big Ten school with only 18 months more Latin than the students I was teaching.
Oh, that's crazy.
So the pressures were intense in terms of learning, and I was just a few chapters ahead. But as intense as it was, it really focuses the mind. So I learned rapidly because I had to. And I'll never forget, I'm standing in front of class one day, and I'm wearing, I think I can maybe even remember the name of the student. It's a pretty generic name. I think his name may have been James Watson.
Okay.
There's no chance he's listening. But James, if you're listening, thank you for this comment that you made. I was wearing an old Calvin College sweatshirt that had got paint on it somehow.
You were teaching in this?
Yes. Because I had been painting some odd job. Remember, we were church mice, right?
Right.
And I think James Watson said, Noe, I guess it's laundry day, huh? And I felt cut to the quick.
Yeah.
And from then on, I decided, if I'm going to be in this spot, I need to dress the part a little bit more.
So you got a wardrobe to match the briefcase.
Yeah. Okay. I got the leather jacket with the tweed, the tweed patches on the elbows. No, I didn't go that far.
Okay.
But I did come to learn that this is not just about mastering Greek and Latin, which was my goal. I mean, it was a self-conscious goal.
Yeah.
I'm here because I really want to master these languages, if possible. It's going to take a long time. But then I also started to learn this is not just mastering the material. You're being inducted into the guild.
Right.
And that was a lot of the friction. I mean, it was similar to the stories you told, right? Just the expectations of getting inducted into the guild.
Yeah. And a lot of it just kind of being thrown into it without a lot of guidance.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you learn by doing.
Yeah, it's a trial by fire.
You suffer into truth. Right. How about number 3?
Well, number 3, I would like to describe as majoring in the minors.
Okay.
Majoring in the minors. And honestly, these are not criticisms directed at my own professors, many of whom have served me faithfully and well their entire career. Karen Green, one of my advisors, she passed away a few years ago. A lovely woman, taught me just so much about being a professor and about being a scholar. John Finnemore, my dissertation advisor, Rob Ketterer, Mary Depew, Jack Holtz, Mark Goldstein, I've already mentioned, on and on. So these folks were not like the criticism I'm going to level here at much of the discipline, which is majoring in the minors, right? If you look at some of the literature on classics, it is the kind of thing that can descend to minutiae,
yes,
right? Pedanteous.
Indeed. Yes.
So I like to talk about my made-up character, Phrynicus of Pamphylonia. I don't know if this is a real person or not, but Phrynicus, right, wrote a treatise on plow length. I don't even know if that's true. I think Phrynicus of Pamphylonia is a true character that I stumbled upon at some point. But he wrote a treatise, on the proper length of the plow you're supposed to use at various seasons. I'm making this stuff up, right?
Right.
Somewhere, someone has written a dissertation on this. Now, it's not that these things are not important, but I didn't go into classics only to talk about minutiae.
Right.
I wanted to be captivated, my imagination, my moral sense by things of lasting importance, right?
Yeah.
Where are the articles and the essays on things like Homer's moral vision, right? Or Virgil's Aeneid as a way to view death. I mean, those things are out there, but any kind of discipline is going to tend to descend to minutiae.
Right.
And classics certainly does this. Now, a book came out at the time, too, and you probably know the book I'm talking about, early 90s, a book that named names.
Are you talking about Who Killed Homer?
I am talking about Who Killed Homer.
Yes.
Yeah, by Heath and Hansen.
Heath and Hansen, yeah.
And I know that book got really badly panned by classicists, in part because it named names.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested in endorsing everything in it, but one really salient point the book makes, which is a lesson I learned pretty early, I think, was go into any major university library and go to the PA section, which is where the books are that we love.
Yep.
And find any book that has been published in the last 10 years on the subject of classics. The chances that it has been checked out more than twice are vanishingly low. And this is true. Now, you can say, well, that's because it was an ignorant, uneducated audience that doesn't care about the things they should. I think the more likely explanation is when you write something that's academic, you're not necessarily writing with the audience in mind.
Right.
And honestly, that is one of the things that annoyed me about graduate school.
No, I hear you.
A lot.
Sure.
Not in my department, They weren't like that. But the rest of the field, it just left such a bad taste in my mouth.
Right. So like the short answer to that question, who killed Homer, for Heath and Hansen is classicists killed Homer.
Correct.
Yep. Yeah.
Because they tend not to see any reason to try to present their work to others. And it's sad.
Yeah. I met a guy who was working on his dissertation, and he was measuring fish ponds Roman fish ponds throughout Italy. And so I remember talking to him, well, what are you doing with that? Are you trying to say with that? He goes, I'm just measuring fish ponds.
I do think that's important,
Well,
right? I want there to be someone who does that and loves that and knows that.
Yeah.
It's just that I don't think that's all there is to classics.
Sure.
At some point, you have to, I think, we have to turn to a broader audience and say, this is important because.
Right.
And I'm not talking about pragmatics, but just it's important because it's a part of the human story.
Exactly. Somebody should do a podcast geared towards that kind of thing.
It's starting to sound a little bit self-serving, but I think it's just kind of natural because these are the things that shaped us to want to do the things we're doing now.
Right. Exactly. Yep. But number 4?
Number 4, very minor, poorly bound books.
Oh, really? This is an annoyance of yours?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Poorly bound books. When I got to graduate school, you're introduced to the Oxford Classical Text series.
Yeah.
These beautiful blue covers, right? And they've got the nice light lime dust jackets, I think. And these were some of the first undoctored sort of pure texts I had seen. So they don't have a vocab down below. They don't have a dictionary in the back. They're not giving you answers for how to translate. This is as close, to my mind, as you can get to interacting directly with the author, right? So I think if it's a book like this, there's nothing on the page but Latin, this is going to be really good. But I guess Oxford will never be one of our sponsors, if you're listening, because at some point in the early to mid-'90s, they started printing these books very poorly. The spray adhesive, you know what that is, right?
Yeah.
If you want to attach something, to the wall of your garage or something, you just take out a can of it and you shake it up, and there's a little rat's tooth inside there that rattles around.
Indeed, yeah.
You spray it on the wall and you slap a poster up there, right?
Right.
Your poster of REM or whatever it is you're listening to.
Yeah.
these days. I'm pretty sure that some of those books put out by Oxford, were assembled using that spray adhesive.
Very cheap.
Because you buy this $120 book and then you carry it around in your pillowcase for a few weeks. Maybe the fault lies with me, and it's falling apart. It's falling apart.
So you ran into that a lot.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, that's disappointing.
It was disappointing, you bet.
Number 5?
Number 5 was the library was too expansive.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you and I went to school with a mutual friend. His first name was Don. His last initial was U.
I remember Don.
Yes,
Yep.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Don was an amazing student.
He
was kind of my model in some ways. I thought, wow, that guy is so serious and gifted.
Yeah.
He went off to the University of Notre Dame for his graduate studies.
That's right.
And he told me once that he had maxed out. He had maxed out the number of books that he could check out from the university library as a graduate student.
Really?
And you know that number is something like 600. I kid you not. This is an enormous number.
Yeah.
So in his apartment, you can't even move from room to room because it's floor to ceiling books.
That sounds like Don.
It does.
Yeah.
I admire that.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Well, the University of Iowa Library has one of the best research libraries in the Midwest, not only for classics, but for Reformation studies. It's massive. Mm-hmm. I had never encountered anything like that before. And sometimes when I would wander into the library for, Journal X or Volume Y, I'd come home with a huge heap of books in my pillowcase once again, things that were intellectual distractions. And
I see.
What I'm really trying to express is that you're in grad school to learn the content and learn the craft, to learn the guild. But I've always had a lot of restless curiosity.
Sure.
And so in some ways, being at a university is not a great place to be if you're trying to do something so specific.
Yeah.
Because the intellectual distractions are manifold.
Too many different paths you could wander down. I gotcha.
For sure.
Yeah.
One of the really interesting books I read was The Myths of Rich and Poor by Cox and Elm in 2000. It's like the spring of 2000, I believe.
Okay.
What should I have been doing instead of reading that interesting book?
Talking about Phrynicus and his plows?
That's right.
Yeah.
I should have been working on my dissertation.
Yeah.
I should have been working on my dissertation. But, that's how it goes.
Right. Right.
I spent a year after I finished taking courses ostensibly dissertating, right? But I didn't really think it through. So for a year, I read all the literature I could on Cicero and his philosophy because that was my topic, right? Cicero and Plato, as I've said before, I think were my special authors in Latin and Greek respectively. But I didn't take any notes.
No notes?
No notes. So I read for a year. I probably read 30 or 40 books on Cicero or more in that time, plus articles and such. Because I was thinking first, we'll learn the lay of the land, then come back and drill down and get the specifics that you're going to need for the actual dissertation.
Yeah.
Turns out that was not the right way to do it. I got to the end of the year and I knew a lot of things, but I didn't know where any of them were. So then I had to go back and redo a lot of that stuff.
Okay.
And these are the things, graduate school is a learning curve. In preparation for this, I asked Mrs. Noe, what did I hate about graduate school? And she said, is this a trick question? No, I'm trying to remember. What did I hate about grad school? She said, well, you hated trying to find parking. Oh, yes, I did.
Well, parking is a big problem in Iowa City?
Well, on the convenient streets, yes. Every street is, a beer tanker. On Friday afternoon, the beer tankers roll in and, refuel the bars. So parking was rare. She said, you also hated public transportation. I said, yes, that's me for sure. I don't like to ride in an empty bus by myself. What else did I hate? Well, then it occurred to me that like many of these Midwestern towns, Iowa City had a certain vibe, right? Mm-hmm. I think I've told you this story before. And I remember so clearly finding the brochure put out by the Iowa Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, yeah.
The Iowa City Chamber of Commerce. This was an effort to draw tourists and residents to the city, and the way they were presenting themselves was educated. These were the bullet points on the brochure. Iowa City, educated, refined, and the third one was sophisticated.
This is one of my favorite stories.
I had to do a double. Sophisticated.
Tell me you saved that brochure.
I did not.
Oh, man.
I have no proof.
Oh, that's great.
Sophisticated.
I don't doubt it for a second.
Who was the sophisticated individual who forgot to put the H in this word? That's where I want to move.
Oh, that's great stuff.
So we decided at the beginning of the episode, right, that when we got to the end,
yes,
we were going to say that the thing we hated most about graduate school
was when it was over.
Is that how you really feel, Jeff?
No, not actually. No.
It was a nice sentimental ending, wasn't it?
It was. I thought I'm hearing the violins behind that a little bit. Yeah.
But like all good things, graduate school came to an end.
It did.
And likewise this episode.
That's right. All right, we got to get out of here.
Indeed.
Let's thank the usual suspects here.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mishka.
Mishka, our intrepid engineer.
Puts this all together, makes it sound so good. We're real appreciative.
Thanks to Ken Tamplin and Scott Vincent for the great music you hear throughout the podcast. And Dave, you want to say something about the Moss method before we get out of here?
Yeah, I do. The summer sale has expired. You missed it.
Come on. Really?
But the Moss method, I'm going fully digital this fall. We announced that last time.
Yes.
Just in case someone hasn't heard it, right? I'm leaving brick and mortar academia. The Ad Nauseam podcast is going to become a viewer experience. We are in the process of building a studio, getting the cameras. It's time to put on makeup. It's time to light the lights.
It is.
It's time to get things started.
That's right. I'm excited about it.
You don't get the reference?
What?
It's a Muppet Show.
Is that what that was? I missed that. I'm sorry. It's
Jeff.
late. It's late.
Excuses. It's going to become a viewer experience.
Yes.
You're going to be able to watch us and our hijinks from the comfort of your living room, your kitchen, somewhere else.
Yes.
We're gearing up for that this fall. We've had so much generous support, folks who have gone to the GoFundMe, which will be in the link, and contributed to try to help us get this going, launch this. And the Moss method is an important part of this. You want to learn Greek, you want to go from neophyte to erudite, you can do it through this method. It's expert, self-paced, and accessible. So you'll learn at your own pace, but I'm always there helping you learn the ins and outs of classical Greek.
Very cool. Very cool. So listeners, if you would leave us a review, a comment on your favorite platform that you should listen to the podcast on. If you want to contact us, send a note to dave@adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V, or to me at jeff@adnauseam.com. Check out the website for updates for the GoFundMe link and everything else we're talking about here.
And we've gotten some great feedback recently. You just got an amazing letter yesterday.
I did, yes.
What was the woman's first name?
Suzanne.
Suzanne,
yes.
Right. We'll be replying to that, but Suzanne just sent a really encouraging, almost a glowing kind of report about how she's been listening to the podcast. She's getting back into the game. We'll probably give her a shout out at some point.
Absolutely. And she's really into casseroles, which makes me very, very happy.
Yeah. So do we know what's coming up next week?
We don't.
So it's TBD, right? It's TBD.
We have a very exciting guest coming that we're trying to settle on. No, we're not going to reveal it
We
now.
can't drop the name because this is huge.
This is huge. This is very, very cool.
And if this doesn't come through, we're going to feel tiny.
Very tiny. But I'm confident it's going to happen. We just don't know exactly when.
Right.
And so that means we don't really know what's going to be on the table next week.
Right. And we have some other great guests that you listeners are going to love. Some real nice surprises coming up.
Indeed. Dave, you got our gustatory parting shot this week, right?
I do. This is from David Mamet. I pronounced his name correctly, right?
I believe you did.
Yeah, and I love this. He says, "We must have a pie. Stress cannot exist in the presence of a pie."
So true.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.